So for a while now, I wanted to do something to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of Jenna Coleman's first appearance in Doctor Who. After looking at what was available to talk about, it seemed the best option would be to turn to her very first appearance, the Series 7 premiere Asylum of the Daleks. This episode has quite a varied reception depending on who you ask, and while it's not one of my absolute favorites, I think there's some interesting stuff going on with it. While the original goal was to focus mainly on the Osmond aspect, during production of this video my focus became drawn elsewhere to a particular discussion point surrounding the episode. So while I had some notes about how the unreality of Osmond's mind compares to Stephen Moffat's other uses of warped reality, and how her resistance to the Dalek conditioning will be reflective of Clara's resistance in similar situations, this video is going to be focused a bit more on the use of the Daleks in this story. Turning back to the discussion point I mentioned, is a recurring statement by critics of the episode since its release, that it would have been better as a Cyberman story. It would have made more sense as a Cyberman story. This is one of those conclusions which I can understand people reaching on a surface level, but also one where when you delve into it a little deeper, it doesn't quite hold up under scrutiny. It would appear the main reason people come to this consensus is the plot point of Osmond being converted into a Dalek, a process of which is more famously a Cyberman move. Putting aside that making humans into Daleks has been something that has been explored before in prior stories, I feel singling out this element to justify it being un-Dalek-like is to miss out on some of the broader ideas that the episode is trying to explore. In particular, we have the exploration of hatred, that of the Daleks for the Doctor and vice versa. And this simply wouldn't ring as true were the focus on the Cybes, given that their whole deal is that they remove all emotions, and thus wouldn't have hatred or fear as a continuing motivator. Also, because the majority of the Cybermen in the revival have been from a parallel universe, the history between the enemy and the Doctor isn't quite as pronounced as the one with the Daleks, who were the very first alien threat encountered in the show, which makes their dynamic more rich for exploration. Delving into the impact that both parties have had on each other was timely at this point in the program, not only as the 50th anniversary was fast approaching, but also because in the prior season the Doctor was confronted with the question of whether his impact and reputation in the universe was ultimately a net positive, whether his defeat of his various foes had allowed for peace or encouraged them to be more dangerous. Even Osmond's presence in the Asylum is later revealed to be an indirect result of a former foe attempting revenge on him. This sort of long-term impact was ironically something the Doctor himself considered when deciding whether or not the existence of the Daleks should be allowed.
Many future worlds will become allies just because of their fear of the Daleks.
Asylum twists that idea by suggesting that the Daleks might not have gone as far in their galactic conquest had the Doctor not been defeating them so often.
We have grown stronger in fear of you.
This conflict eventually escalated into the Time War, where the Daleks and the Doctor's people were wiped out, which took the Doctor's hatred for the Daleks even further and drove him to great fury. This intense hatred is something the Daleks seem to have noticed in the Doctor.
You would make a good Dalek.
That despite all his detestation of Dalek philosophy, he himself revels in intense hatred for them.
Perhaps that is why we have never been able to kill you.
This episode pushes the point that the Daleks see beauty in hatred, and it's fair to assume that is in part because of the strength and clarity it can provide. It's not too dissimilar to how the Sith view such emotions in Star Wars.
Release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me.
While that isn't to say having hatred to those who commit vicious acts can't be channeled into a positive cause, when that becomes the primary thing driving your actions, things can get pretty ugly, and you can be led down a bad path. I've seen enough Cobra Kai and been on Twitter long enough to know that can be true. This consideration seems to be something that the Doctor continues to dwell on in his following incarnation, as he finds himself disappointed that his hatred for the Daleks is what has the Dalek Rusty turned against them, rather than the beauty and wonder of life that changed him originally. And near the end of the 12th Doctor's life, he will note that he doesn't perform his actions out of hatred or blame, but because helping people is the right thing to do. And this line of reasoning seems to be a good one to keep in mind, as ultimately it wasn't the Doctor's hatred for the Daleks that helped him get out of the Asylum, nor was it Vader's hatred that got him to finally stop the Emperor. Rather, it was the capacity for self-reflection and compassion towards others and vice versa. It's the encouragement of kindness and decency that can be considered the Doctor's most important impact on the universe, and something the Daleks won't ever truly have even while they push him to continue helping out. And ultimately, the best we can hope for is that out of their evil, there continues to be something good.